Ladies, please, please settle down. It is snippet time. Hello, and welcome to Sober Living Snippets, where we live alcohol free so we can heal our relationships, feel youthful again, and ditch regret and shame. That's what we do. It's about the body, it's about the heart, it's about our relationships, it's about the way we feel about ourselves. It's about getting rid of alcohol so we can finally live our lives. Welcome to the Snippets, gals. And if you're new, I am so glad you found your way here. I'm Becca, and I have a snippet for you today on emotions. Emotions, what to do with them, how to handle them, what not to do with them, what they can do to our lives if we don't take care of them. I want to start by telling you a story. It's kind of personal, but I know I can trust you. I know this is a safe space, so I'm going to give you a story of my own experience. Throughout my life, I've more or less been a self-help junkie because I wanted to stop drinking and I couldn't find the answer. So I tried everything and I never gave up, and I was constantly trying everything could come across to try to get alcohol out of my life. And in one time, I went to a seminar and I was taught how to breathe. And I was a little disappointed. I'm breath. Come on. I want something more powerful than breath. I believe, at the time, right? This is my thinking. And I'm like, I believe that breathing is important and breathing can actually calm us down and all that jazz. But I wasn't super thrilled because I wanted something more than just breath. The seminar was supposed to be about, I can't even remember what that seminar was about, but it wasn't advertised as learn how to breathe. And I got there, and the first thing the guy did was teach us how to do a deep belly breath, which of course I had learned in yoga. You've probably learned that as well. And I thought, okay, fine. Well, we're going to start out by learning how to breathe, and then he'll get to the good stuff. And he never got to the good stuff. This guy just had us breathing, and he kept talking and talking and talking. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but he kept saying throughout the talk, he would interrupt himself every few minutes and say, are you still breathing? Keep breathing. He started by teaching us the breath, and then he was talking with periodic interruptions to say, hey, keep breathing. Don't stop breathing. And so for lack of anything else to do, I'm surprised I did it because I was pretty cynical, and I was always rolling my eyes and not listening and figuring I know better than they do. Ego was a huge hindrance for me throughout my life. So for some reason, though, I kept breathing. I think because he just kept saying over and over, keep that breath going, just keep that breath going. And then he would continue talking. So an hour and a half later, the whole thing is over and he wraps it all up and I go away, and I was kind of mystified. I thought, well, what just happened there? I mean, he was kind of an interesting speaker, but he didn't give us really anything. He talked about life and happiness and, stuff like that. And basically just had us doing this breathing for a good hour and a half. So anyway, I go home, get on with my day, finish the day, cook dinner, do whatever I have to do, the usual stuff. And then I go to bed that night and oh my God, I suddenly came awake at about 2:30 in the morning, abruptly jarred awake, bawling my head off. I was just pouring tears and snot and I was heaving, like chest and belly sobs, like deep sobbing I've never sobbed like that, never cried like that. And I couldn't stop, and my nose plugged up as the snot and tears rolled out of my face from all directions. My cat was on the bed, and she looked at me just terrified and ran away, which she never does. And so I grabbed a box of Kleenex, and I didn't know what else to do, so I just sat up in bed and let her rip. And the emotions I didn't know what they were. There were so many emotions pouring out of me that I couldn't even identify them. I just thought all I could do was just let it happen. And it lasted about, I would say 45 minutes before I could actually breathe normally. And I think the main emotion that I was feeling was sadness, and probably mixed with fear, actually, and mixed with anger, which are the three major emotions we have. Some would argue those are the only emotions we have, which is an interesting thought if you think about it. Sadness, fear, and anger. Those are the three emotions, right? And yeah, now that I think about it, actually, I was feeling all three of those. I hadn't thought about that before, but man, they just tore out of me. And at one point, I was so plugged up from all the crying that I couldn't even breathe through my nose. And I was just, anyway, it just soaked with tears and snot. Probably more information than you wanted. And I had a big, gigantic ball of used Kleenex on my lap as I sat up there in bed. Luckily, I sleep in a bedroom by myself. I am married, but I have my own room. So that's another snippet, isn't it? Uh-oh, did I just tell a private secret? Oh, well, you won't tell anyone. And then slowly, I calmed down. It took quite a while. I remember the one thing I was thinking was just don't panic, Becca. Just let whatever's happening happen, right? I seemed to it intuitively. I knew that much. And then slowly, I calmed down and got it together. And I got up and I got a glass of water. And I can't remember. I think I might have just went back to sleep eventually. I might have journaled. I might have written a few things. I don't know. It's not really that important. But eventually I went back to sleep because those emotions were very exhausting. I just slept like a baby until morning. Got up the next morning. I was a little bit puffy-eyed. But I felt great. I felt so light. And in the days leading up to this, not the days leading up to this, the weeks, months, and years leading up to this, I was the type of person who did everything in my power to stuff my emotions. I had learned early in life that there is no point in crying. In fact, the one key story from my childhood where I'm convinced that started is in my book. So just a short little story about me crying one day, and my mom's reaction to my tears was bizarre. Turns out she was completely baked on Valium, and I didn't know that. I was 6 or 7 years old, and well, I guess I can just tell you the story. I can't remember what happened, but I was very upset, and I ran to my mom, and she was in the living room, and I sat beside her on the couch. And she put her arm around me and let me cry, which felt so good. And I felt really safe. And I thought, wow, I'm being comforted. I'm safe. I'm okay. And I cried and cried and cried. Now, I have no idea what was the matter. And after a few minutes of me crying, my mom turned to me, all glassy-eyed, and said, wow, man, your tears sound like waterfalls. I was so shocked. In that moment, I grew up. I feel like I went from a child instantly to an adult because I saw her. I suddenly saw my mother and realized she wasn't there. She didn't hear a word I said, and she didn't care about my tears at all. She was off in her own little universe. Later, much later, I would learn, because this was the 70s, I would learn that that was not long after she started her Valium journey, I guess. And she was on her own addiction journey. So in that moment, though, to get to the point here, it took me a long time to figure this out, but I believe that was the moment that I stopped crying and I stopped expressing my emotions. And I didn't think about this consciously throughout my life from then until the time this big explosion happened, 30, 40 years later or whatever. I figured all this out later. But my point here, the important point is that was the beginning of me going through my teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, my whole life, up until this happened, which was in my late 40s. I never cried. I never expressed. To me, the lesson was, and I would actually learn this lesson again later through my dad would do some things where I learned very, very clearly that emotions are unacceptable and pointless. Nobody cares how you feel, and expressing them will get you nowhere. And so I stuffed them. That's the point, okay? And it was like 40 years worth of emotions exploded out of me that night. It was bizarro, I'm telling you. And at the time, it didn't occur to me about this workshop, this talk that I had gone to. But later that day when I was walking, taking my dog for a walk, it suddenly hit me. I wonder if that was a result of that hour and a half of belly breathing. Because I breathed. He kept saying, just breathe, just keep breathing. And I kept thinking, what is this bizarre guy doing, right? Gals, what is the point of this? The point of this is that I have since then learned, and I've been to other workshops, and then after that, I got sober. This was before I was sober. So don't forget, that you got alcohol in the mix, and it's messy, right? But then a few years later, I would get sober. And then in the last 7 years of getting sober, I would learn a lot about how we heal, become a certified life coach, and just learn so much about helping people heal. And I now know that releasing our emotions is, the word important is it's not a big enough word. It is mandatory. If we don't release our emotions, and I don't mean express them. There's a big difference between expression and releasing, right? And that's a different talk. But if we don't release our emotions, oh my God, you're living in hell and you don't even know it. You don't know what's wrong. You can't figure out what's wrong. Well, that's what's wrong. I didn't know. So another word for releasing our emotions is letting go. And this brings me to an exciting plan that I have for us gals. Starting January 20th, we're going to do another book study. And I'll talk more about this in the days leading up to it. For those of you who may or may not know this, I'm a recently retired English professor. So English was my subject. And so, my whole career, I've been studying and teaching literature. And so what I did when I became a life coach, and then when I started this podcast, is I include periodic book studies because I'm damn good at it. I'm good at helping people get the meaning out of books. Not that you don't know how to read. That's not what I'm saying. Just that I'm very good at it. And so we've done some book studies here in the past, and I have another one coming up that's really exciting, and I want to give you a heads up. And the book is called Letting Go, and it's written by David R. Hawkins, MD, PhD. Now, normally when we do a book study, I will encourage you to buy the book and read along. But in this case, not so much, to be honest. We're not studying this whole book. We are only doing the first 2 chapters. Chapters 1 and 2, and the introduction, actually. And not only that, I'm not reading I never read to you on this podcast. That would be, other than maybe a paragraph at the most. But what we're going to do is I want to take you through the first 2 chapters of that book, because in that book, he teaches us how to let go of our emotions. And that experience I had that night changed my life. I didn't know it at the time, but it changed my life. And so I want to help you learn how to release your emotions. And Hawkins is not the only one who teaches this. There are a lot of teachers who teach letting go, and I teach it when women come to me and they join my coaching program. It's one of the first things I teach is how to breathe and release emotions. But that's another snippet. So the takeaway for today is the importance of releasing emotions, and that's not the same as expressing them. And to give you a heads up that we are going to be looking at these 2 chapters of this book starting on Monday, the 20th of January. And if you show up, you can buy the book if you want, but I'll tell you this, it's a bit academic and a bit of a dry read after you get through the first couple of chapters. I love David R. Hawkins, but he's a very academic guy, right? He doesn't really write for the, popular self-help readership. But what he teaches is incredibly powerful. And as I say, there are others that teach it too. And when we do the study, I will give you some other names for other resources. But my whole point here is that I would love it if you would get ready for the 20th, because what you'll want to do for those snippets is show up with a pen in your journal and have the time to sit still and practice what we're learning, at least maybe not during the snippet, but afterwards. So there it is. I hope that excites you. It's what we've got coming up, and I'm really, really excited to teach this and practice it together, because there's so much power in letting go of your emotions. So, yay. I hope you're excited. As I say, for me, it changed everything. And I feel like it was a blessing from God, sitting through that hour and a half and breathing. One of the things that I've decided to do in 2025 that I haven't been doing, I started the snippets in 2023, coming up on 2 years. In March, it'll be 2 years. Got over 350 episodes. I mean, right? I've said a lot of stuff, but you know what I haven't done? I haven't spoken about my relationship with God or my spiritual path or my spiritual journey. And it just hadn't felt right. I always do the snippets from the heart, from what feels right, what comes to me. Before I turn on the microphone, I take a few deep breaths, I close my eyes, I say a little prayer and ask for guidance. What do these gals need to hear? Guide me. So it's very heart-centered. And up until now, I haven't had the feeling of sharing my very sacred, very personal relationship with God. But recently, that's been changing. And so I'm going to follow my heart. And so I'm going to be talking more about that in the coming weeks and months. And I wanted you to know that I believe that explosion that night, that workshop on breathing, was a blessing from God that just said, Becca, it's time to release these emotions. Believe what you will. That's what I like to believe. Just a reminder, in 2025, the snippets are Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I will see you on Friday. Remember, I'm rooting for you. Thanks for popping in. Be sure to come back tomorrow so we can keep your head on straight. Sending you buckets of love.